Welcome to NASA Science Live. This is your chance to interact with NASA experts and have your questions answered in real time. I'm your host, Tahira Allen. Today, we're diving into the excitement surrounding the upcoming total solar eclipse that will cross North America, passing over Mexico, the United States, and Canada. If you have questions throughout the show, you can send them in using the hashtag AskNASA on social media, or drop them directly into the comment box wherever you're watching. Now, this eclipse isn't just any ordinary celestial event. It is a rare opportunity for millions to witness the moon completely block out the sun, turning day into dusk for those in the path of totality. And get this will be the last total solar eclipse to cross the contiguous United States for the next 20 years. What makes this even more special is that an estimated 31.6 million people live within the path of totality. And if you're not in the path of totality, no worries. Everyone in the contiguous United States will have the chance to see at least a partial solar eclipse. Now picture this, a collective pause as people across the U.S. gaze upward to experience the wonder of the cosmos together. I can't wait. And today, I'm joined by Dr. Gina DiBraccio, a sun expert who's going to walk us through how to prepare for the April 8th event. Gina, welcome.
Hi, Tahira. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for being here. Now, can you kick off by telling our viewers a little bit about your role here at NASA?
Sure. So I'm the Deputy Director of the Heliophysics Science Division at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. That means I'm helping to oversee an organization of scientists that are studying heliophysics, which is the study of the sun and its influence on everything. So we're looking at the physics of the sun, but also how it impacts the Earth's magnetic field, the upper atmosphere, and really just understanding how the whole system works together.
That is great. And Gina, I'm so happy to be here with you again today.
Yes.
Gina and I had a blast hosting last year's annular solar eclipse, and I think it's safe to say we are thrilled to be back again for the total solar eclipse. Now, before we dive into some details, Gina, can you help clear something up for me?
Sure.
What exactly sets an annular solar eclipse apart from a total solar eclipse like this year?
Okay. So when a solar eclipse happens, the moon is going to cross in between the Earth and the sun. And when that happens, the moon's shadow is cast on the Earth, and we can look up in the sky and see it. Now, for an annular eclipse, the moon is going to be just a little bit farther away so that it doesn't completely block out the sun. And that's what you can see on the screen here. You're left with a ring of fire in the sky. Cool. Now, for a total solar eclipse, the moon is going to be closer to the Earth so that the sun is completely blocked, and that way we can see the solar corona. It's that hot upper atmosphere of the sun that we can't see with our visible eyes on a day-to-day basis.
So it's really good to know that difference because, you know, it's my understanding that in total solar eclipse, the safety tips then are a little bit different than an annular.
Right, exactly.
And so for our viewers at home, we have a special guest, someone you might recognize, who's here to let us know how to safely view the April 8th event.
Hi, Eclipse enthusiasts. Lance Bass here, and I want to tell you how to protect those eyes and stay safe during a solar eclipse. During these celestial events, the sun, earth, and moon are in sync, creating solar eclipses. You can look directly at the sun during a total solar eclipse, but only when it's completely covered by the moon for a brief period known as totality. This is a really special moment. At all other times, you should wear eclipse glasses so that you don't say bye-bye-bye to your vision. Seriously. And eclipse glasses are not the same as regular sunglasses. No, they're not. Safe solar viewers are thousands of times darker and will have a specific certification that you should look for right here. Don't be a space cowboy and try to look directly at the sun. If you don't have eclipse glasses, you can use an indirect viewing method, like a pinhole projector. You can make one of these with something as simple as an index card with a hole, or a colander, or even your hands. With the sun at your back, you can safely project an image of the sun through the hole onto a nearby surface like the ground. It's gonna be me who is wearing my eclipse glasses, and so are you.
Okay, we are already seeing a lot of questions pouring in online from our viewers watching, so let's jump right into this Q&A. Now remember, if you're watching live, you can submit your own questions for Gina using the hashtag AskNASA or by posting them in the comments wherever you're watching today. Alrighty, Gina, our first question is from, it actually looks like, so we've got kind of a group question here.
Okay.
It looks like a lot of people watching are asking about notices that may have been issued in certain areas with guidance on how to prepare for crowds and preventative measures meant to reduce traffic. Could you give us a little bit more info on how to best prepare for April 8th?
Sure. So as you said earlier, Tahira, along the path of totality, we have about 31 million people.
We have a lot of people, which is so cool to think about.
So it's already crowded to begin with. And of course, we'll have people traveling into that area to make it even more crowded. So, just think of the preventative measures that you can take in case you get stuck in traffic. So make sure you have gas in the tank. Make sure if you have a battery operated car, you've charged up, you have some extra food and water with you. If there are traffic lines, just be prepared to have patience and wait a little bit for that.
Thank you, Gina. And so we have our next question is from a user on Facebook who wants to know what science will be done during the total solar eclipse.
Right. One of the things that we're most excited for at NASA is actually performing different science experiments during the eclipse. Now, a favorite that I like to talk about is that we're using NASA's WB-57 high altitude research jet to perform some experiments. So the jet,
cool.
The jet's going to fly across the path of totality so that it gets a little bit longer in totality than if you were just standing on the ground. And what that means is that the instruments on board are going to look up at the solar corona and take images so that we can study the composition of the corona, understand how particles are accelerated and charged, and also be able to study dust that is around the sun that we can't really understand when we look at just on a day-to-day basis either.
And this is only an experiment that can be done during a total solar eclipse, is that right?
Right, so we do have instruments called coronagraphs that are essentially artificial eclipses, and they will block out the sun so that we can study the corona. But the way that the light bends around these coronagraphs, we can't actually get deep down into the corona itself in that lower part of it. So for the total solar eclipse that happens naturally, it allows us to get down into the lower part of the corona, which means this is one of the only times that we can, study this area of the sun.
That is amazing. And so we have our next question on Jordan, from Jordan on YouTube, who wants to know, why is it bad to view a solar eclipse directly?
Okay, thanks for that question, Jordan.
Yeah.
So we want to be really careful about eye safety during any eclipse or even on a day-to-day basis. You don't want to look at the sun so that you're not causing any permanent damage to your eyes. Now, the way that it works for a total solar eclipse is that during the partial phases, you need to have the proper safety viewing that we just heard about. You can have the eclipse viewing glasses, you can make a pinhole projector, and you need to use that to see the partial eclipse. If you're in the path of totality, during totality, you don't need to have those glasses. You can look directly up at the sky and see the sun because it will be blocked. So you're just looking at that corona, you're not actually going to be looking at the sun, but only for totality.
And I have a great follow-up from Mouse757 on YouTube who wants to know, where is the path of totality for this event?
Okay, you can go to the NASA website, go.nasa.gov/Eclipse Explorer, and it will show you the map so that you can actually see where totality is located. But across the U.S., it will stretch beginning down in Texas, all the way through Ohio. We'll have a station in Cleveland doing the broadcast too, and then up through Maine as well. Yeah, exactly.
And thank you for that. And then our next question is from Matthew Hinson on YouTube, who asks, what happens to the moon and the sun as seen from Earth?
During the eclipse, so we have the sun in the sky, and the moon will be crossing in front of the sun. So when you're looking up at the sky with your proper safety gear, what you'll see is that the sun slowly becomes covered by the moon. And that's our perspective from the surface of the Earth, basically, is that we're going to see the sun kind of disappear as the moon moves in front of it.
That is so cool, too, that the moon is just the right size, to cover the sun
Yes.
during this event. And so we have Alana Franklin on YouTube who wants to know, how long will the eclipse last?
So if you're in the path of totality, maximum totality will be around 4.5 minutes long. It depends, though, where you even fall within that path. If you're on the edges, it could be a little shorter. You want to be kind of as deep within it as you can, and then you'll get that maximum totality. But I will say that this eclipse that we're having coming up in April, totality is lasting longer than it did in 2017 when we had the eclipse across America as well.
Do you know why?
So it just has to do with kind of where the moon is in its orbit, how far it is away from the sun. And for that one in 2017, maximum totality was only about 2 minutes, a little bit more than that. So we're almost doubled.
Like doubled. Oh man, that is so cool to know. So our next question is from a viewer on X who wants to know, what tips do you have of taking pictures of eclipses?
Okay, well, if you are taking pictures of eclipses during totality, you can use your phone. That's fine. The same way that we can look at the eclipse with our eyes during totality only, you can also use your phone to take pictures. Now, at any other part, you need to have a proper solar filter in order to take those photographs.
So not during a partial eclipse.
Correct.
Yeah, anytime. Okay. So our next question is from Ryan on YouTube who asks, when was the last eclipse and when is the next one?
Okay. It depends on how you define eclipse. So in this context, let's talk about total.
Okay.
Yep, total eclipses, total solar eclipse. So the last one that crossed through the U.S., as I just mentioned, was in 2017, and I was actually fortunate enough to see that myself. So I was really excited to see it. Yeah. So the next one coming up, though, isn't for another 20 years. Across the U.S. So you'll have to really, take advantage of this one unless you want to wait 20 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so actually, this is one of my favorite questions. We have Wilbur on YouTube who wants to know, do animals react in a certain way? What are some of these changes that we can expect during a total solar eclipse?
Right. When the eclipse is taking place, it really gives that feeling of dusk, and nature reacts as if it is dusk. So if you have the opportunity to view the eclipse also in more of a quiet place where you can appreciate nature, you might be able to see the birds flying back into the trees to nest for the night, or you can hear the crickets come out and chirp and just kind of look around and watch nature, because it really does react to what's going on with the eclipse.
It is so cool to think about, too, that this is just like a multi-sensory experience for everybody.
Right.
And so our next question is another, I'd say, group question. We are getting a lot of questions about the timing of the eclipse in specific areas around the country. And, actually, luckily, NASA's got us covered with that, with an incredible tool to help with just this. As Gina mentioned earlier, it's called the Eclipse Explorer Map. And our friend James Traley is back here, and he's going to walk us through how we're going to use this new map to prepare for April 8th.
Have you ever wondered how to track a solar eclipse down to the exact second? NASA has you covered for the April 8th, 2024 total solar eclipse that would be sweeping across North America. I'm James Traley, and I'm going to walk you through how to use NASA's Eclipse Explorer, an interactive map designed to help you plan your eclipse viewing experience. This interactive map offers layers of detail that you can toggle on or off to explore each facet at your own pace. Start by visiting go.nasa.gov/Eclipse Explorer. Today, I'm showing you how to prepare for the April 8th total solar eclipse. So let's jump in. This is the map with the eclipse path. A menu should appear on the left, which you can expand or collapse with this little arrow that you see right here. With this menu, you can manipulate the map in a lot of ways. But I first want to show you how you can look up what the eclipse will look like in your location, and the timing of when you should look up, with proper eye protection, of course. I'm at NASA Goddard in Greenbelt, Maryland right now, so I'm going to type that into our zip code city bar and hit enter. And it will snap right to our location, Greenbelt, Maryland. And you'll notice when the map zoomed in, it displayed a box with information about what I will see and when in my location. You can click on the various phases of the eclipse with these little icons right here to see what the sun will look like at different points during the eclipse. The map also includes information about the current weather and cloud coverage, along with a countdown to the maximum eclipse and the percent of the sun that will be covered in your area. If you're located in the path of totality, where you have the chance to see the total solar eclipse, your information box will have a special feature when you click on the maximum eclipse. To demo that, let me go over to Cleveland, Ohio, which is in the path of totality, and snap that up here for you. So in the spot where we saw the percent of the sun covered in green belt, now instead there's the duration of totality, which for Cleveland is 3 minutes and 49 seconds. That's when the moon will completely block the sun. And when I click on the time of totality, and to be precise for Cleveland, it's 3:13:45 p.m., you see it snaps directly to what the sun's upper atmosphere, called the corona, will look like from Earth. A total solar eclipse is the only time we can see this faint region of the sun with our own eyes. The corona also holds clues for scientists about the sun's behavior and activity. Some other cool features include the ability to use the slider bar that you see right here to move the moon's shadow across the path of totality. You can see it sliding like that. On April 8th, when the eclipse is happening, you can select this live button that's right here, and it will track the eclipse in real time. By clicking the percent coverage that's right here, I can zoom out a little bit to show this, you can see just how much of the sun will be covered by the moon in any given area, even outside that path of totality. And remember, it is only safe to look directly at the sun without eye protection during totality. At all other times, including when the sun isn't blocked at all, and during a partial solar eclipse, you should wear eclipse glasses or view through an indirect method like a pinhole projector. For safety tips from NASA, visit go.nasa.gov/eclipse eye safety. There are many more layers and features to dive into on the Eclipse Explorer map, so I encourage you to take a look to prepare before the total solar eclipse crosses North America on April 8th. And join me, along with other NASA science communicators and experts on April 8th, for the NASA broadcast starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be taking you with us as the eclipse moves across the country. Thank you, and enjoy the total solar eclipse.
Impressive, right? Now, you can access this map from the comfort of your own home and witness the eclipse journey in real time on April 8th by visiting go.nasa.gov/eclipse explorer. Now, Gina, this map is one way for folks at home to get involved in the eclipse, but I understand there are some other ways that people can play a true hands-on role in this April 8th event. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Right. We have different projects among NASA where the public can get involved in order to really contribute to our understanding of the eclipse and eclipse science. So 2 of those projects that I want to talk about, the first one is Globe Observer. And with Globe Observer, you download the app to your phone, you need a thermometer, and what you do is you actually take measurements before, during, and after the eclipse of the temperature where you are. You record it in the app. You also take pictures. It's very simple for people at home to do. You take pictures of cloud coverage as well, because what that's doing is it's reporting the conditions local to you so that we can understand what changes the sun is actually having on our atmosphere during the eclipse. So that's one of the projects where anybody in the public can get involved. Now the other one is called Sun Sketcher. And this one, once again, requires an app from your phone that you download, and you're going to put your phone down and actually just let it take pictures during the eclipse. And what it will do is focus on the Bailey's beads that form. So that's kind of the light that you see peeking around the moon as it's covering the sun.
Oh, cool.
And those Bailey beads are the light coming through kind of the peaks and valleys on the moon, where it helps us to understand the size of the sun and the shape of the sun and really kind of what's going on there with the structure of the sun. And so with that one, again, just a simple app that you download, you leave your phone go, and it takes the measurements for you.
I mean, technology these days, you know, right? Like it just completely fascinates me that you can do NASA science from your cell phone. And if you're interested in learning more about these projects that Gina just mentioned, or other ways that you can do NASA science, visit go.nasa.gov/do eclipse science. Now, Gina, not only will we be able to witness a total solar eclipse on April 8th, I've heard that for those in the path of totality, you could also see some other things in the sky around that time.
Oh, that's right.
Could you tell us a little bit about what we could expect?
Sure. So we actually have the opportunity to see some planets out in the sky during totality, because when totality occurs, it's going to cover up the sun and it makes the sky darker. So we have the opportunity, as you see on the screen here, to see Jupiter, also Venus. Those are going to be 2 of the brightest planets in the sky.